We want to welcome everyone to the Southern RAC tonight, the December 8th at 6 p.m. We have a full RAC tonight. Everybody's here from the RAC. And we want to welcome the public that's watching and appreciate the comments that we've received. Tonight, we'll just go ahead and jump right in. We'll start off with introducing the RAC procedure. To start off, let me go ahead and read the statement on the COVID and how we're doing our RACs while we're working with this COVID pandemic. So it says, due to the COVID-19 pandemic and the ability of the virus to spread from person to person, the governor has implemented a number of executive orders directed at controlling spread of the virus by minimizing face-to-face interactions. Public gatherings are strongly discouraged by the CDC, state of Utah, and local health departments since they facilitate face-to-face contact and pose an elevated risk for virus transmission. The Division of Wildlife Resources and the chair of this public body have determined that the public gatherings at regional advisory councils and wildlife board meetings present a substantial risk to the health and safety of those who attend, and will conduct this meeting using a fully electronic format. This meeting format is authorized by recent amendment to the Utah Code and executive order by the Utah Governor Gary Herbert, and will be temporarily used in place of the in-person public meeting that usually occur around the state. Anyone wishing to comment on agenda topics in the future meetings or to observe this meeting may do so by logging into the division's webpage. Again, we continue in this format. We'll see how much longer it lasts, but appreciate everyone's patience with us. As we mentioned last time, the public input has worked well. We've received a lot of comments from the public, and we appreciate the public being engaged that way. We do look forward to meeting together face-to-face, though, at some point, hopefully in the near future. So let's go ahead and introduce the RAC. And if I could let's just go around and I'll start at the top of the list that I have here. And if you would mind just stating your name and who you represent. So we'll start at the top. Austin.
Austin Atkinson, Cedar City, Utah, representing public at large.
Bart.
Bart Batista, non-consumptive rep.
Thank you. Gene.
Gene Boardman, Hinckley, Utah, representing the public at large.
Riley.
Riley Roberts, Tropic, Utah, sportsman.
Chad.
Chad Utley, St. George, a public at large.
Nick.
Nick Jorgensen, St. George, non-consumptive.
Sean.
Sean Kelly, Fillmore, representing the Forest Service.
Verland.
Verland King, Bicknell, agriculture.
And Craig.
Craig Lobb from Burrell, Utah, agriculture.
Tammy.
Tammy Pearson, Beaver County, elected official.
Dan.
Dan Fletcher, Cedar City, Bureau of Land Management.
Thank you. And I'm Braden Richmond, Beaver, Utah, and I'm representing Sportsman, also the chair of the Southern RAC. So tonight we also have several members of the division with us to answer questions and to assist us. We thank them for being here. And then I also notice that Carl Hurst is on. I think he's the only one from the board that's on tonight, but we appreciate Carl being here. Anything you want to say, Carl, or do you want to just remain silent in the background?
No, just appreciate everybody's time and effort on this. I had to miss the Central RAC and didn't want to go into a board meeting without at least visiting one of the RACs. So appreciate everybody.
We appreciate you joining and thank you for being here. Just a couple items real quick. Kevin told me tonight that Sean Kelly this will be the last RAC that Sean's with us. The Forest Service is going to bring in Chuck Chamberlain to fill that role. And we appreciate Sean. Sean, you've been here quite a few years. I don't know how many, but thank you. And, yeah, you look really sad that this is your last meeting.
No, I appreciate being part of the process. Yeah, it's good. Chuck is going to do a great job. So it was just time to kind of pass that on. But yeah, it's good. And I've been going to RAC meetings for 20 years now. in one form or another. So it has been a while.
That's why you have gray in your beard.
Yeah.
Too many RAC meetings. Yeah, Kevin pointed his head. True statement. We're all getting older. Appreciate it though. We really do, Sean, and thank you, and look forward to working with Chuck in the near future. So with that, let's go ahead and move to agenda item number 2, the approval of the agenda and minutes. If there's any questions or comments there, if not, we take a motion to approve the agenda and minutes.
I'll move to approve the agenda and minutes. This is Craig.
Okay, we have a motion to approve the agenda and the minutes from Craig. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Thanks. A second from Tammy. Let's go around and vote. Austin.
Yes.
Bart.
Yes.
Gene.
Yes.
Riley.
Yes.
Chad.
Yes.
Nick.
Yes.
Sean.
Yes.
Verlin.
Yes.
Craig.
Yes.
Tammy.
Yes.
Dan.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes unanimously. We'll move on to item number 3, the Wildlife Board meeting and update. Hopefully all of you had a chance to watch that. I'm sure it was every minute of the 4-hour meeting. It was more than 4 hours. Ours was 4 hours. It was 6 hours, 7 hours. Yeah. So just some live viewing if you haven't had a chance to watch that yet, but we'll try to recap it here for you tonight. I'm going to go through the motions. There are a lot of them, but you know, I thought maybe I could highlight it, but I don't think I can. I'm just going to go through all the motions and try to address it that way. So be patient with me. And if you have questions, if you could just maybe make a note and we'll try to address any specific questions at the end. So there was a motion made that passed unanimously to move that we deny any new blinds, allowing the existing of 20 blinds to stay for 10 years and at the end of 10 years be removed. Sorry, this is in regards to the waterfowl recommendations and rule amendments. So that motion passed unanimously. Then there was a motion to accept the division's remaining recommendations as presented, and that passed unanimously. And now moving into the big game season and key dates, there was a motion to reduce the season on the Pine Valley, Virgin River, and Pine Valley Beaver Dam Desert Bighorn sheep hunts by 7 days to stop the overlap with the general season deer hunt. The 7 days would be removed from the start of the hunt. That motion failed on a vote of 4-2. There was a motion to move to ask Director Falks to return to the January board meeting to be recognized for his career and retirement. That passed unanimously. We'll comment on that more at the end. That's a good one to circle back to. In fact, I'll let Kevin comment on that. But, a motion that we reduce the general season elk spike hunt on the Book Cliffs unit to 5 days. That passed unanimously. A motion that we change the New Harmony extended archery deer dates to September 18th through October 15th. That passed unanimously. A motion that we do not approve the recommended age class on the Book Cliffs Little Creek and keep it at 7.5 to 8. And that passed unanimously. A motion to keep the Central Mountains Nebo age objective at its current objective of 6.5 to 7. That failed at a vote of 4-2. A motion to accept the new limited entry hunts on the Cache North, Oquira, Stansbury, West Plateau, Barney Top, Caparowitz, West Desert, Deep Creek, and Box Elder, Pilot Mountain. That passed unanimously. A motion to move 9 Mile Anthro to a limited entry hams hunt instead of a recommended bull elk unit. That passed 3-3 with the chairman making the tiebreaker vote. To accept that. A motion that we discontinue the current limited entry hunts on the Cache North, Oquira, Stansbury, West, and West Desert Deep Creeks. That passed 5-1. A motion to change the Box Elder, Sawtooth, Oquira, Stansbury East, Southwest Desert North to a limited entry hams hunt. That passed 4-2. A motion to approve the boundary changes for Plateau Boulder, Southwest Desert, South Box Elder, Grouse Creek as presented, and that we don't split the Okara Stansbury into east and west. And that passed unanimously. A motion to increase the general season any bowl permit quota to 17,500 and add unlimited youth permits that will not count towards a quota. And that passed 5-1. A motion to extend the archery hunt on the any bowl seasons by 9 days for the next 2 years until the elk committee reconvenes and then discuss it. And then that was amended to make it from 9 days to 5 days. And that passed 4-2. A motion that we ask the division to review the possibility of youth, any weapon, elk tags going to residents only and bring back the information next year. This to be placed on an action log, and that passed unanimously. A motion to accept the pronghorn recommendations as presented, and that passed unanimously. A motion that we move the Henry Mountains Hunter's Choice archery hunt season dates to January, that passed unanimously. A motion for the Henry Mountains Hunter's Choice archery hunt be set for the January 18th through 31st, and that passed unanimously. A motion to continue the Desert Bighorn Sheep archery hunt with the unit and dates determined by the division and to discontinue the Zion Archery Bighorn hunt. That passed unanimously. A motion that we approve the archery Rocky Mountain Bighorn Sheep hunt on the Fillmore Oak Creek, and that passed unanimously. A motion that we discontinue the Box Elder Pilot Mountain Rocky Mountain Bighorn Sheep hunt, and that passed unanimously. A motion that we accept the balance of the recommendations for the 2021 big game season key date hunt changes and rule amendments, and that passed unanimously. And then number 5 is the deer management action plans. There is a motion that we discuss deer management plans, population objective recommendations, and deer management plans, unit plan revision recommendation together, and that passed unanimously. So again, that was 2 agenda items on the agenda, and they made a motion to discuss those simultaneously. There was a motion that we approve the deer management plans as presented with the addition of Elk Ridge increasing from 1,000 to 2,000. That passed 4-2. On to the CWMU and landowner permit recommendations. A motion that we accept the request for cactus buck permits on the Alton CWMU with the stipulation that the season date has a September 15th opening. The public tags are not sold and are allocated to youth or disabled only. And that four in favor and 2 recusals. Okay, so 2 people recused from the vote on that. Motion that the division and the CWMU Advisory Council present to the board a report on current public lands located within CWMU boundaries and the reasoning or justification for it. That passed unanimously. A motion that we accept the remainder of the CWMU recommendations, and that passed unanimously with 2 recusals. 4 in favor, 2 recusals. And then a motion that we approve the landowner permits at the 2020 allocations with the exception of decreases due to decrease in public permits on the unit with the exception of LOAs that qualify under the new proposal for additional permits, keeping the proportions the same. And that passed 5 in favor, 1 excused. And then finally, that they accept the conservation and permit adjustments. So a motion to accept that as presented, and that passed 5 in favor with 1 excused. So again, a lot of motions, a lot of discussion. If you haven't had a chance to look at that, it is available on the division's website. It was a long meeting because there was a lot to go over. Just something to make everyone aware of. There was also some discussion that in the future, that November meeting always is a long meeting. That's the kind of the big meeting of the year, and the division's looking at a way to reduce the items in that meeting so that we can more fully discuss and have the time to discuss everything that needs discussed in that meeting without it becoming overwhelming. So they're looking for some options there, and the plan is to spread some of the items out into the other RAC meetings throughout the year. So we'll see what that comes back and how it looks. Any
Hey, Brady.
questions there? I hope you don't have a whole lot of questions because I'm going to defer to somebody else to answer them, but go ahead.
I just want to make sure that Kevin's not off his treadmill somewhere. I missed the Southwest Desert elk. What they end up doing on that one?
So the Southwest Desert elk is going to be made into a hams hunt. Correct me if I'm wrong, but as I remember it, all of the elk units that were proposed to be put into general units, there was 4 that they were going to make general units. All 4 of those, the board determined to make them hams hunts. And the Southwest Desert is one of those. That northern Southwest Desert portion, I want to be clear there, not the Southwest Desert unit, just that northern, the new unit on the north end. Is that correct, Kevin?
So they,
Yeah, that's correct, Tammy. So it will remain a limited entry hunt. It will be that hams hunt. It'll have a long season. Probably fits that area okay with the low elk densities that are out there. It's going to be a tough hunt, but people will have time to hunt it. And that wrapped into the recommendation, instead of going unlimited on the any bull tags, because there weren't any new any bull units, the board kind of cut down their recommendation. All 4 of the RACs, or all 5 of the RACs, had recommended 20,000 tags. They reduced that to 17,500 because we're not adding any additional any bull units, but they still wanted to increase opportunity some. And in addition to that, they did follow the recommendation from all of the RACs to make any bull tags unlimited for youth, and those tags will not count against the cap.
okay, thank you.
So where does the ham number unit? Yeah, those tags. Where do they come out of? Are they a separate number?
Yes, it's a completely separate limited entry elk unit now, and will have its own permits allocated just to it, Craig.
And just a reminder, Craig, they'll go over the numbers in the April RAC. And so that's when they'll present the numbers for the permits, and we'll have a chance to review those and make recommendations in April.
Okay.
Any other questions there? Okay. I'll give it to Kevin to give us a regional update.
Okay, thank you, Braden. As Braden alluded to earlier, and I may have mentioned this at our last RAC meeting, but Mike Fowkes has announced his retirement from the director of the Division of Wildlife Resources, and he will be officially retiring at the end of December. Brian Steed, who's the DNR director, who is essentially the boss, our director's boss, joined the board meeting last week, and at that time made the announcement that Rory Reynolds has been appointed as the interim director. Rory's name should be familiar to many of you. He was an assistant director in the Division of Wildlife before he went up to being an assistant director in DNR. He also, earlier in his career, served in my current position as the Southern Region Supervisor, and spent a lot of time in our habitat section. Rory will be, as much as Mike will be missed, Rory will be a really good interim director for us, and I think the agency is pretty happy with that announcement. Next, moving on with our wildlife section, we flew the Escalante sheep unit this last week. The population has increased since the last census, which is good. As a result of that flight, Levi Watkins, who's our Wayne County biologist, has been put on probation for 5 years because he finished the flights on Sunday when I was scheduled to go with him on Monday. And so I didn't get to go. So Levi kind of got himself in a little hot water there, but he'll get over it. Deer captures are going well. They've been going on throughout the region for the last week or so. Teresa wanted me to make sure to apologize. We're not able to get the sportsmen and others involved with us this year because of COVID, but as soon as we can, we'll get people back out and participating in that with us. Deer classification is underway and mostly completed within the region. Christmas bird counts are upcoming, and if any of you are birders or know people who enjoy bird watching and are good at identifying birds, they can get involved by going to utahbirds.org, and they can sign up for a route and participate in that effort. And then on kind of a scary note, we've got rabbit hemorrhagic disease continuing to spread in Utah. It's now been confirmed in Iron County. It's one of those things, rabbit cycle of diseases are usually play a large role in that. We don't see hemorrhagic disease all that often, but we do have it going on right now. Teresa, is there anything you'd like to add to that before I move on?
No, I think you covered it well. And this hemorrhagic disease, it is new, 2020. It's from Europe, and it's the first time we've had it in the Western United States. So we're not really sure about the impacts, but we are concerned for all of the predators on, and it does affect rabbits, hares, potentially pika also. So they're such a great food source for so many animals. We may have some prey shifting, so we'll have to keep our eyes open.
Okay, thank you, Teresa.
So does that transfer, sorry, Kevin, does that transfer to species?
I think it's specific to the animals in the rabbit family, in the leopard family, but I'm not 100% sure. Tammy, like Teresa said, it's a new thing for us here in Utah. So I can get an answer to that question from our vet. I will do that and zip you a text.
Okay, thank you.
From our habitat section, the restoration projects are progressing. That's really the big push this time of year in our habitat section. Most of our fire rehab is done, except for Washington County, because we're able to kind of push that one off because we don't have to worry about getting weathered out down there. We will be interviewing tomorrow to replace Rhett Boswell as our impact analysis biologist. Rhett played a really key role in our region as our GIS specialist, and so we're hoping to replace his skill set. We've got a bullpen of candidates that we'll be interviewing tomorrow, and hopefully we can make a good decision there. Gary Bezant, our habitat manager, is part of the Utah drought, or attended a drought seminar, and Southern Utah specifically is currently classified in a severe drought, and there's really, the forecast isn't all that positive. We may be in for a dry winter as well, which will mean we're gonna have to be really careful next year when it comes to managing wildlife populations and domestic livestock, and just watching our range conditions very closely. And then lastly, seasonal road closures on our wildlife management areas. In most cases will begin January 1st. Then the one last update we have is from the outreach section on the perch tournament. And I'm going to ask Phil if he would fill you in on what's going on there.
Thanks, Kevin. Yeah, typically the perch tournament is kind of an ongoing fish contest for tagged perch where they can catch perch throughout the year and submit those to win a prize. A big drawing that happens in September. That tournament usually has a large single day kind of a kickoff event with thousands of people from around the state go to Fish Lake. That usually happens in January. This year, we obviously won't be doing that large scale single day kickoff event. However, the tournament will continue sort of as normal in that people can still turn in tagged perch to the Lakeside store throughout the winter and then throughout the year. And we'll actually have two drawings this year, one the 1st of April for prizes, and then another one on Labor Day weekend in September like we normally do. So just letting everyone know that we're not doing the large scale kickoff event. So.
And that's great. That's all I have for a regional update unless anybody has questions.
All right, thanks, Kevin. Let's move on to agenda 5, the Black Bear Rule amendments and recommendations. And this is the last agenda we have tonight, so it will be a fairly quick meeting. At this point, everybody should have had the opportunity to watch the presentation, and we received public input. Kevin, do you have a summary of the public input on this? And then we'll jump into questions and comments from the RAC.
Yes, we had 7 individuals comment, all of them from the state of Utah. And of those 7, 29% were in favor of the recommendations. We had 71% opposed.
Thanks, Kevin. And as I read through those, it seemed like the opposition was just almost a general opposition to hunting bears. It wasn't really anything specific that I could gather.
There was some just opposition to hunting bears, and there were a few houndsmen that were commented as well.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, kind of split on those two. Thank you. Hopefully everyone had a chance to look at those and address those. So with that, we'll go ahead and open it up to questions from the RAC.
I've got a couple of questions. First of all, have we got evidence that bears are really causing mortality among the deer in any kind of numbers?
We do have some data on the book cliffs, Gene, that shows black bears targeting those neonate fawns. So on the book cliffs, they're have been doing a study on fawns just as soon as they're born. And a couple of things we've seen there. One, we've got collared bears on the book cliffs. We've seen them key in on those fawning areas at that time of year. And we've also seen increased mortality to some of those fawns from bears. Bears are in the mix with other things too. There's coyote mortality and lion mortality that time of year. We don't see a lot. In fact, I don't think last year we saw any adult mortality to bears. That doesn't seem to be a big issue. We are running a study with USU right now that's looking at what we call I can't even say it tonight. What if bear steals a cougar kill? Let's just put it that way. And looking at that possibility. So the theory would be if a cougar makes a kill and stashes it and a bear comes across it and steals it from the lion, that lion may then need to kill more deer in a year to make up for that difference. We don't know the answer to that question. That's something we're looking at right now. So in general, Gene, what we'd be looking at for predator management for bears is fawn to doe ratios in the fall. If you've got healthy adult deer and they're way below their average fawn to doe ratios, that might be a unit you'd want to look at bears. There's a couple of caveats to that. One is it'd have to have a fairly high density bear unit. So something like the Book Cliffs or I don't know, down there, maybe the Boulder. Teresa could probably do the units a little better than me, but and then try to determine that. But usually we're looking at other things. If it's top down pressure on a herd, it's more likely to be something like mountain lions than bears, but bears can have an impact.
The bear impact on fawns, is that mostly just in the first 2 or 3 weeks of fawning?
Yeah, it seems like once they're up and moving with the does, that drops off, and so we don't see a lot of mortality in fawns older than 6 months. So in the fall, it doesn't show up as much. So it's really those first few weeks.
Thanks.
So I have a question. So it says if the division decides, and that seems pretty arbitrary. And so you mentioned some metrics, but are those the exact metrics you'll use to make a decision, or is it, what are they going to be?
Bart, what we did in the policy that passed when we did cougar recommendations, we put a lot of power in the hands of local biologists that know their units, and so those decisions will be made at a regional and district level as far as what's going on the ground, what's the habitat like. Bear impacts to those herds are likely to be rare, but it's possible, as we've seen on the book cliffs, that you might see a unit like that. So the metrics I've suggested to the biologists to look at is, where are you with regards to your long-term average and fawn to doe ratio, bearing in mind that drought can impact those numbers as well. And what's the overall body condition of your adults? Are they healthy? They're not limited by habitat. And then it really comes down to knowing the district, understanding the dynamics, and being on the ground and seeing what's going on.
And so then how do you tease out, well, I get two more questions. First, would it ever go back to the RAC if they wanted to make that decision, or are we giving you carte blanche?
The legislation that passed directs the division director to make decisions if herds are struggling. And so we evaluate predator management plans or the need for them in December after we get those fat numbers from captured animals. And then again in the summer after we see what happened over the winter. So, and then the way that the policy was approved by the board is the director would make those calls. So if it needed to be under predator management, it would be a director action.
Okay, so second question, why does the division want to not include the units where this policy may be implemented, the take numbers and the total state numbers? It seems like you're skewing your data. And it doesn't seem, why wouldn't you want to just have that data in there? You could have a footnote that says 10% were from a predator management plan or something.
Right. You could probably do it that way too, Bart. I mean, what we're changing tonight is to try to make sure the plan jives with the new law. So that the plan couldn't require, there has to be some kind of caveat in the plan to allow additional units to go into that liberal category. And so this is the way we chose to address that. It was just to not consider those. So you kind of take those units out of the plan and manage them to try to limit densities. And then once you determine either your predator management plan has been effective or not, you pull them out of predator management. They'd go back into where they were before as far as management strategy goes. But that was our approach. There may be other ways to get at it.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
And Darren and Bart, just to be clear, we're still requiring all of the bears to be checked in. And so all of the harvests will still be documented and recorded. Bart, so we will know, we won't be bears harvested that we're unaware of under this new plan.
Right.
So if I go to the website and I look up the 2019 or, the previous year's data, will the numbers there reflect the take from these management units or will it not?
It will. So with bears are a little bit different in the policy than lions. Lions, those units go unlimited. For bears, it would be an increase in permits, but it would still be a cap on permits. But the objective would be to get the harvest parameters to a point where you're seeing a 10 to 20% reduction. Bear populations are relatively low, slow reproducing, and so you can make impacts a lot quicker than you can with lions. We need to be a little bit more careful with bears when we do that kind of stuff.
Right, and I know you said you're going to defer to the local biologists, but as with since deer is kind of the metric, and you mentioned the, fawn to doe ratio around now would be, is when you're going to determine that metric. How do you tease out seasonal or droughts, things like that? How do you tease out weather impacts to survivorship?
Those are discussions that we'll have. So I don't want to leave the impression that the local biologist bears all the weight, but it is initiated at the regional level, and then we'll have discussions about that. And the plan needs to have a justification. So it needs to be clear in the plan what the data says, why we're making these decisions, and what we hope to see as a result of the changes to the harvest strategy. And so they're not just open-ended kind of plans. We need to see they're measurable.
Okay, yeah, no, it's, as you said, since they're slow reproducing, the impacts are going to be greater, and we need to be very judicious.
Right.
In this, and it's a blunt tool for if deer is what most people in Utah care about, right? No offense. I mean, that's what that appears to be, from my non-consumptive perspective. That's kind of the metric people use, and so you're using a blunt tool to help the deer at the detriment to maybe a healthy bear population. Which that's probably more for the comments portion. So.
The objective would always be for bears to slowly reduce that population density and hopefully see some rebound in those deer populations. So we need to watch both, but that's the intent of the management.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, I have a question. This is Austin. Question for Darren. Darren, I see this black bear management plan is quite old now, coming up on 10 years, and we're making some adjustments to get it more in line with current legislation. Do you envision that a substantial portion of this would need to be changed when it's renewed in 2023, or do we have it fairly close where we'd like to be? I'd like your input on where it's at now.
It seems to work pretty well. Obviously, when we hit that deadline, we're going to want to review it, and typically we'll put committees together. What we've done with other plans, we're in the process of looking at cougar management plan. Look at what other states are doing, look at the latest literature. But right now it seems to work pretty well. We have seen some growth in our bear population over the last 5 to 8 years. And bears don't typically have the same kind of impacts you do with obligate predators like mountain lions, but there are some units where we have the option. So it's hard to answer definitively, but there'd be a process, and we'll get started on that probably in 2022, unless something else comes up that we have to address sooner.
One other quick question, if I may. How much collaboration is there between your mammal division and, say, the big game coordinator? Like, I've always wondered, as we get more into predator management here, like, we don't have Toby Jones on this call, and it's more your department. And I understand the differentiation, you have different factors there, but how much collaboration is there now between this predator legislation and all these changes? Do we need more? Do we need less? Or what's going on behind the scenes?
Covey and I have set a goal to make sure there's a lot more collaboration between the two programs. The way some of these predatory species that we manage, you need to think of their prey base like we do mule deer habitat, and there are circumstances where these predators can impact those populations in a negative way. And so he and I work really close on the policy changes, and we'll continue to have. One other thing I'd like to have is more big game interest in some of these committees as we work through management plans. We've had it in the past, but cross collaboration between the two programs, I think, is key. So we'll be working a lot closer than maybe we have in the past.
Really good questions. Any additional questions from the RAC? Let's move into comments. Any comments from the RAC?
Yeah, this is Verlin. I've got a comment. I just heard you say a couple times over that the bear plan, the bear management, and the lions is working pretty well. Well, I'm representing agriculture, and I am a livestock man who runs cattle on the Boulder Mountain. And from the sightings of the bears and the sightings of the cougars and what's going on the land, it's not working. Your plan, whatever you're doing, isn't working to manage these predators. And I'm not sure how much damage they do to the deer. I know the cougars do, and the bears, I trust your judgment on that. But as far as trying to keep the numbers in check, and that's what that legislation was for, is to get these numbers down. It's not working, and that's why the legislation passed so easily. And as I watched some of those other RAC meetings, those guys had no clue. They voted against this proposal that you're doing, which is just some housekeeping stuff, because they didn't think the legislature should be doing what you guys should be doing on the ground because you're closer to it. And I would agree, but we've discussed this several times in other RACs, and we've been reluctant to take the bull by the horn and make some changes, whether it's in the how to get these lions harvested, where you've got, and the bears, the hunters are selective. They only kill trophies, and that doesn't affect the numbers on the ground. And that's my thoughts on your bear plan, your bear model, and your cougar model. It's not working on the ground. Thanks.
I'd like to chime in on that too. The livestock people I've talked to have seen more conflict with bears and cougars this last year or two, and yet looking at your charts, the conflicts that have been documented has been trending down, and I was wondering how come, because that's not what we're hearing on the ground.
The data in the presentation are based on incidences that are reported to Wildlife Services. So if they're not reporting them, then that wouldn't show up in that chart. And again, we're just talking about bears. I think I'd have to look again, but I think lion incidences were up. And I think the incidences, let me double check. I think the incidences were up, but the damage was down. Yeah, well, we had slightly more incidences from 68 to 67 over 2019, but they didn't kill as much livestock, I guess is the easiest way to put it. And so the damage values were down, have been down since 2018. So incidences would probably indicate, how many bears are there out there getting in trouble, and that's probably the one that we ought to be looking at. And then Berlin, just real quick, I thought I was just speaking to the bear plan. The lion plan we're actually in the process of taking a look at, and the current lion plan grows mountain lions. There's no question about it. And so we're taking a hard look at how do you make, if you don't want the densities of lions in an area that you have, what are the metrics you need to be looking at? And so that's something we're looking at right now.
Just a couple quick comments here. Verlin and Craig, appreciate your comments. As you make comments, as the RAC chimes in to make comments, if you can just state your name prior to the comment for the minutes and the records, that would be helpful. And then also, I understand that the bear and the cougar are tied together and that they're both large predators, but this, you know, we are talking about the bear plan tonight, to be specific. So we probably don't want to get too off track there.
Yeah, this is Verlin. We're actually not talking about the bear plan. We already covered that, didn't we? You're making some amendments and changes that will help you fall in line with the legislation, right?
Yeah, that's right, Verlin. Tonight, what we're voting on is just a couple of tweaks to the plan to make sure it complies with the new law.
Well, this is Gene. I'd like to just put in a little bit here. As we go through a lot of cycles, we were going to save the deer with a dedicated hunter program. And I think I know I've yet to kill a deer that's there because of the dedicated hunter program. And I'm not sure I've ever seen a deer that was there because of the dedicated hunter program. Then we was going to save all the deer with cutting all the junipers on the mountain. And that still our deer numbers are down. Then we went after the coyotes in a big way. And that hasn't solved the problem with the deer numbers. They're going to cycle no matter what we do. Weather and disease and stuff is going to make a lot more difference than coyotes or cougars or bears. And so anyway, now we blamed it on having too many cedar trees. We blamed it on having too many coyotes. Now we're going to blame it on having too many bears and cougars. And if you want to really do something, take out the freeways and get rid of the elk. They have more effect on the deer than the bears and cougars do. And this, I understand that you've got to square up with legislation, but I'm not in favor of the legislature running the program. I'd have been a lot more happy with it if it had come from the division instead of the legislature. And so I think that we're being pushed into this without it really being showing scientifically that we need to go out after the bears to save the doggone deer. Bears are going to eat a deer or two. That's what bears do. But if most of the damage is done in 3 weeks in the spring, I don't think they're making a big hole in the deer. So that's my perspective on this whole thing.
So, Braden, can I speak to that?
Yeah, go ahead, Tammy.
Okay, Tammy Pearson, Beaver County. You just gotta love politics, but I do have to say, you talk about public outcry and representation on the RAC and the division and different things like that. You have a whole nother lobbying effort that hits the Hill during the legislative session. And there's a lot more people that are not involved in the RAC process, a lot more voices that have come to elected officials. And those are the messages that get carried up, and the movement comes from the legislation on the Hill every spring or late winter, whatever you want to call it. So I was there, I was in the middle of all the meetings and that they talked about. And you've got everything from the houndsmen, the SFW, wool growers, cattlemen, everybody's up there talking about these issues. And I think that when they don't get what they want through the RAC process, they go to legislation. And so the division was involved in a lot of that kind of stuff, I think, as well. It's not just strictly legislation. There was a lot of people in on that. So it was a hard sell. It was just like the comments that we get. We get a lot of people up there during those committee hearings and then the floor votes and in the end, that's where the legislation came from, because there, like Verlin said, there's a lot of impacts that's not just deer from these kind of critters. So that's my comment.
Thanks, Tammy. Any other comments?
Mr. Chair, this is Austin. I'll make a quick comment. I've been representing the public at large. I think it's important that I comment that we as RAC members, as sportsmen, as Utah residents, we need to be very careful how we continue to manage and reach other residents of Utah in regards to bears, cougars, and wolves in any sort of fashion. I've been part of multiple incidents in other states where groups have raised a lot of funds to try to shut hunts and management like this down through legislation and from the top down. And so I hope that the division can continue to write plans that are able to be read by all interested parties, hunters and non-hunters. And I hope that we can all help educate through outreach, because it's a battle that is not fun to fight once you lose a lot of the ground that we've made up over how many years here in Utah. When hunters and non-hunters come together and fight about it, it is not pretty, especially with these mammals we're talking about. So I hope that we can be cognizant of that, listen to the public, listen to all the parties involved, but that we're ready when those fights come, because they will come. That's my comment.
Thanks, Austin. Any more comments from the RAC?
I'd like to just say, clarify that I'm with agriculture. If agriculture thinks that there's too many bears and we want to reduce them because of agricultural problems, I'm probably with that. I just don't think that it ought to be our current situation with low numbers of deers is a good reason to go after bear.
I have another comment. So I'm looking at the memorandum in the minutes or in the packet, and it says the predator management plan units will not be considered as part of the statewide roll-up. So earlier when I asked the question if they would, you said that it would still be tracked, but here it says it's not. So what is could you please clarify that?
You're on mute, Darren.
I do that every single meeting. I've only done it once, though. That's probably a good record. So the state plan requires, currently, without these changes, requires us to take all of the harvest data and amalgamate it into one, pull it all together on a statewide basis. And that the parameters, the harvest parameters need to fall within the moderate harvest strategy sideboards. The problem is, if we're required to do that and we have units that are being managed more aggressively to reduce densities, that may not be the case. And so we need to figure out, we need a way to make sure that we're not the solution was to not include those as part of the roll-up. So any plans that aren't in a predator management plan, any units would need to fall within that moderate harvest strategy when we pull those together at a statewide basis. We will still track the harvest on the predator management units, and biologists will look at that. But the plan, again, I'm not sure that we can meet that requirement in the plan if we've got multiple units, more than 25% of the units in liberal harvest strategy, because they're under predator management. So that's why we are recommending that. Did that answer your question, Bart? I'm not sure.
And it does answer my question. Again, I kind of fall back on, I want to be able to see it in what is being taken in the annual harvest, or what's the right name for this report? In the Black Bear annual report.
Yeah, it'll still be in the report. So all the data that's in there now will still be in there. It's just when we, for the purposes of the plan, at the end of the season, actually every 3 years when we roll that all up, we'll leave these units aside and report them separately, or consider them separately for that statewide roll-up of data. So everything else should fall within a moderate sideboard, and then we'll look at the others and see where they fall, but they won't. We needed a way in the plan to allow for that to happen.
For typical years in compliance with that moderate level, are we way off that? Would 1 or 2 units that go into a predator management tip you outside of that balance?
I would anticipate that it would. No, it probably wouldn't. And with bears, maybe as a point of reference, what we'd be looking at for bear predator management is high density bear units that aren't currently in liberal strategy. I think there's 7 of those across the state, Book Cliffs, LaSalle. There's a few more, but so there aren't a lot of units to begin with. So if one of those units was pulled into predator management, it may not affect that statewide wrap up, but we didn't want to, in order to be compliant with the legislation, we wanted to make sure that we either need to remove that requirement in the plan or find some way to consider these units separately in case they did pull it into more liberal sideboards. So that's why the recommendation is the way it is.
Okay.
All right. Any more comments? I think we've had some great discussion, and we'll continue to take comments as needed, or I'd also entertain a motion at this point.
Mr.
Chad Utley. So the motion by Austin and the second by Chad Utley. Any additional discussion needed? All right, let's take a vote. Austin.
Yeah.
Gene.
No.
Sorry, Bart, I missed you. Gene, do you want to state the reason for the no? You don't have to, but I like to ask.
I think I've pretty well stated them, that I don't think that the bears are a problem with their population.
Okay, thanks, Gene. Bart?
No.
Would you like to state the reason?
I don't think the numbers should be separated out from the annual report. I think it should be rolled in, especially if it's not going, there's very low risk of it deviating or causing us to tip out of the moderate strategy. Additionally, it doesn't seem that it's as Gene said, 3 weeks, probably not big of an impact. And it seems like unnecessary, again, the blunt tool.
Thank you, Bart. Riley.
Yes.
Chad.
Yes.
Nick.
Yes.
Sean.
Yes.
Verland.
Yes.
Craig.
Yes.
Tammy,
Yes.
and Dan.
Yes.
So the motion carries with 2 noes. And again, I'll represent the reasons for those at the board meeting. Appreciate your input and your time tonight. The final item that we just want to go over real quick, the next RAC meeting, I don't believe is until April, right? So we have a couple months off now. And I guess the one thing we want to maybe discuss quickly, I think it's probably safe to assume with the current climate that it's likely we'll be doing this format again in April. Do we have a time? What time do we have scheduled for that? Currently, I think it's currently at 5.
Traditionally, we've had the October and April meetings are 5 because they usually are the big game meetings that are longer. With this format, it's a little more efficient than the in-person meeting, but we started our meeting in November at 5 and we didn't get done until close to 10. So
hopefully you guys bring us a shorter list of things to go over in April.
it's a big game, right? It's going to be a long time.
It's true.
So I would suggest no later than a 6 o'clock start, but a 5 o'clock start might not be a bad idea, but whatever the RAC prefers, we can do.
Do you guys have opinions on that? We can discuss it and make the decision.
What date are we looking at?
Tammy's voting 5 o'clock, so it's on the 13th of April. Would anyone be opposed to 5 o'clock or have a strong reason to go to 6? I think Kevin's point's valid. You know, the 2 biggest RACs of the year are the rules and recommendations, big game, and then the dates and answer lists in April. So that does tend to be one of our longer meetings. Should we just stay with the standard of 5? That's what it's been historically. I've seen a couple head nods. I saw 5. So
Leave it at 5. Yeah.
sounds like we're going to leave it at 5 for the April RAC meeting. Okay. I think that's all we need to go over. I do want to recognize that Donnie Hunter joined us partway through the meeting, and again, a member of the board. So we appreciate Donnie being here and appreciate him listening in. We want to recognize him. So thank you, Donnie and Carl. Anything else we need to go over tonight before we close the meeting?
Merry Christmas, everybody.
Thank you.
Merry
Same to you.
Christmas.
Yep. Good night.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah.